Can you be charged with a crime if you think you're helping the police? We'll talk about a case in Detroit with noted criminal defense attorney Tom Grieve. Tom, thank you for being here. This case in Detroit, guy is running from the police in a vehicle, fleeing in his vehicle, turns down the street. There's a man outside who happens to be armed. He has his concealed carry handgun on him. He sees this guy running from the police, pulls out his gun, shoots at the passing car. Now, crazy part is he fired one shot from his handgun. I'm assuming 9mm. That's probably, maybe it was a 45.
Gotta be a 45.
Yeah, 45. Stops the car, shuts it down, ends the police chase with one shot to the engine compartment of this car, and then gets charged with 2 felonies for using his gun, ends up pleading out to take a misdemeanor deal on recklessly discharging a firearm. This thing is just a can of worms. You're shooting at a moving vehicle in a neighborhood. You're not involved. He said that his surveillance system at his house shows that he was in danger, but he took the plea deal because he was facing 15 years in prison. Where do we even begin on something like this?
Okay. So if you're going to pull out your firearm and pull the trigger, you are exercising deadly force, all right?
But wait a minute. He was shooting at the car, not at the guy.
We're getting to that.
Okay.
But from the prosecutor's perspective, you are using deadly force, okay? You're putting a bullet that's leaving your chamber, leaving your barrel at, 45, maybe less than 1,000 feet per second, but otherwise, depending upon the barrel length and caliber and all that kind of stuff, likely over 1,000 feet per second. But in any event, if it hits someone, that's going to be deadly force. And just trust me, the way prosecutors think, you're pulling the trigger, bullets leaving the barrel, deadly force.
Lots could go wrong in this situation too when you're dealing with a moving car in a populated neighborhood. So right. I need to stress that these are some of the elements of actually taking a shot: target acquisition, target isolation, things like that. So.
Right. So we've got the shot that goes out, the car that stops. So the prosecutor can say, look, if you're going to use deadly force, you have to be able to articulate why you're in reasonable fear of imminent death or great bodily harm. So was the car barreling towards you? Was it barreling towards someone else? Were there other preclusion issues, such as, well, I could step behind this thick tree? And let me be clear, I'm not, one of the things that really bothers me, one of the things that grinds my gears, Kevin, is you keep seeing all these videos online of, a mugger trying to grab a woman's purse in a crowded restaurant. And rather than all these guys pile driving the guy, everybody runs out of there and leaves this poor defenseless person to be dealing with the mugger when there's 50 good guys sitting around. And while I'm not saying that, and I don't know, I'm not an expert on Michigan law or anything like that, and I'm not licensed there, but I feel like it's situations like this that make people run away, right? Somebody
that
who
I don't want to get involved,
right,
because now this guy's in serious trouble for helping the police.
Right, for what he was trying to do to help the police. Now, look, was shooting at the car the right call? Well, according to the prosecutor, at a minimum, it wasn't. And who knows why that car was running. Maybe it was something they were just running for a routine traffic stop because someone in there had a warrant, or they had drugs, or they had something else like that. Maybe it was something far worse, right? Don't know. I don't really know also what the position of Michigan law is. In other words, is Michigan one of those states out there where you're allowed to use deadly force to capture or detain someone who is in the act of committing a felony, right? Because there are a couple of those states out there, to my knowledge.
And fleeing from police in Michigan, fleeing from a traffic stop, fleeing from police is a felony. So the person was committing a felony. And from what I understand in the case, the guy who pulled his gun out said the car was coming at him. When he pulled his gun out, then the car turned back onto the street and kept going, and that's when he fired.
Right. So. We basically missed the worst part of it on surveillance footage, which, by the way, is also just a lesson about cameras and surveillance footage. We have this cognitive bias, thanks to TV shows and everything else, that we're going to absolutely trust and anchor on what we see on camera or in a picture or something like that. And all we see is this guy shooting at this passing car.
Right. It only gives us one view and one short portion of what's happening.
And our cognitive bias is such that this guy basically starts as guilty as a result, I think for lots of people, as opposed to if we just saw the car, for instance, if it was careening directly at him as if in an effort to hit him, right? We might think something very different about his use of deadly force. But instead, we've got his word about the fact that the car may have jumped a curb or something like that was coming at him, and then we just see him basically pull out his gun and shoot to disable the passing car. Let's get back to something that I know people are going to be questioning about, which is if you deliberately and successfully shot the engine block to disable the car, to assist the police, is that deadly force? Because I mentioned that the prosecutor is going to say absolutely yes, that's deadly force. And the prosecutor is going to say, look, even if we don't have to use a deadly force criteria, because I don't know what he was charged with, but it was probably like a recklessly endangering safety as a felony or something like that. Generally speaking, when you start hearing words like reckless, we're in what's called a criminal negligence territory. So that's the mens rea. I'm throwing the big Latin words at you.
You do this all the time.
But mainly it's for fun and my amusement. This time I'm doing it to be educational. So that's the mens rea. So different levels of mens rea, that's our criminal intent, right? So you've got intent, so you have to intentionally strike someone for it to be a battery, right? So intent, knowledge, I just have to be knowledgeably in possession of drugs. And you get into different levels. The level of criminal negligence generally deals with a level of negligence whereby it's so gross and it's so endangering to someone or a group of people that that's where it rises to the level of being criminal negligence, that your activity could foreseeably result in serious injury or something like that. And again, I'm not speaking specifically to Michigan, I'm just taking a wide angle lens of the United States criminal negligence law. So the prosecutor at trial would likely have to prove basically that this guy shooting at a passing car, no matter how accurately and successfully he did, and let me be emphatically clear, folks, this is not me saying this, I'm giving you what the prosecutor's argument would be, that that act endangered people's lives and he didn't need to do that, basically.
And I think maybe he had a pretty good defense attorney, or at least a pretty good defense strategy in saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm a military veteran. I knew what I was doing. I knew where I was pointing my gun. I knew what my target was and beyond it and all the other things that you have to do to make a safe shot. And I think in the end, he said, he can say too, and it worked.
Right.
I did this, the car stopped, the police caught the bad guy. The balance is in there. Should you help the police or should you be using deadly force to save yourself? That's, I think, where some debate can come in. Pull out your gun and shoot at somebody in a passing car going down the street just to help the police, that could be kind of dangerous. The round skips off the hood or doesn't hit solidly and goes down the street and hits little Susie. Now you got real serious trouble. But in this case, he did everything right and it worked. So I'm happy he only came away with a misdemeanor.
I'm stunned that one shot stopped the car.
Yes, I want to see this thing.
Like I want to know.
I want to know where he hit the car.
Did he hit like a wire harness that fed the spark plugs? Like I don't like
the internal computer, something.
This is the most interesting part to me about this case is wait, you got a one-shot stop with like a concealed carry handgun on a car?
On a moving car.
Right. Did he hit the computer chip like we were speculating? I don't know, but is he using 32 ACP, the one true caliber, as some people say? I don't know, Kevin. I don't know.
Yeah, as I watched that, and it looked like an old retired police car or something, a Crown Vic or something that went by, and he fired a single shot and stopped it. But I guess that part of the debate is moot. We're trying to figure out legally, ethically, morally, what's going on with this guy, and just get people to stop and think about if they're in that situation, what should they do?
Yeah, I don't think we're necessarily trying to put our finger on what's the ethics of it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to caution people about the fact of this is what can happen.
Right.
And you got to know what your local laws are, because apparently there was a prosecutor who was none too impressed that he was able to successfully stop the people who were eluding law enforcement. Now, maybe that weighed into it with getting a misdemeanor and what sounds like a probation sentence. I bet the firearm's forfeit and gone if I had to guess. Lord knows how much he had to pay his defense attorney. So he's probably many thousands of dollars into this, if I had to guess, just on the back end. And all for what? To stop someone who decided to flee from the police because they had an ounce of marijuana and a warrant for their last ounce of marijuana. I mean, he's the loser in all this, but every time I see a case where it looks like the good guy, whether they did everything right or if they did some things that were wrong, chose to intervene and just got burned for it, I feel like we all lose, because it just contributes towards that culture of, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna watch someone get victimized, which wasn't necessarily what was happening here as of that moment. Who knows if a block down the road, the car hits Susie, right?
Right.
Maybe he saved Susie, we'll never know. But, it's just, what was that case back in Boston? Kitty, where...
I'm drawing a blank.
It was a famous case from 60 some odd years ago, so maybe longer at this point, where just everybody in this neighborhood watched as like this guy just murdered this woman in broad daylight, and no one intervened or did anything about it, and they all just watched.
And I think the more times we see a prosecutor go after what we would call a good guy or a good person attempting to stop a bad person, the more times that happens, the more likely we are to see people who will just pull out their phone and videotape and
Right.
let things happen. And that's, to me, that's sad. You're right. If you're in a restaurant and somebody's trying to steal a old lady's purse, there should be half a dozen guys jumping up and giving him a beat down so that he doesn't do that again. But in this day and age, you never know what he's carrying. You never know what's going to happen to you. If you punch him in the head and he hits his head on the table and dies, then are you in trouble? There's so much going on that just, it's not right. It just is what it is.
Right, I mean, you got the physical danger of, you don't know if he's got other friends there with him, you don't know what he's armed with, you don't know what he's capable of, just bluntly, number one. And then number two is you got the legal danger that follows the incident, right? And I think a lot of people are justifiably very alert and alarmed about what's going on with our justice system, where, I mean, depending upon how this case resolves, it's possible that the bad guy in the car got the same outcome, some sort of misdemeanor and probation.
He may not even have been charged with,
Right.
part of that incident or
Right.
what's going on. But it's just sad to see people doing good things and it coming to this.
It is.
Thanks again, always, for your insight, Tom. Truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Now, before you go, if you think you're using the right caliber for self-defense, think again. And you might not even know it, but your ammo could be putting you at severe disadvantage when you pull the trigger. Click the link in the description below to watch this short, unbiased video comparing the top 4 self-defense calibers and see if you end up changing handguns.